Life is Strange Double Exposure is the direct sequel to the original Life is Strange that was released in 2015, because instead of focusing on new characters and protagonists, as we've seen through the various Life is Strange sequels, including Life is Strange 2 and the most recent iteration in 2021 with True Colors, Max Caulfield, the first protagonist in the franchise, returns to the forefront, removed from the events of Arcadia Bay some 10 years ago, where her hometown was destroyed mostly because of her own powers. Her ability to stop and rewind time gave gamers a decision to make, where Max had the choice of either saving her hometown or leaving it to be destroyed by a storm in an effort to save her love interest, Chloe. Now, Chloe doesn't exist in this. Instead, the gamer is given an option in the first chapter to tell Sophie, apparently Max's new best friend, what happened to her love interest in the first game many years ago.
Would it kill you to open up the teeny tiniest bit? What happened?
I mean, we were together for kind of a long time after high school. And
this is, ironically enough, the most important decision that you make throughout the game, and it happens in the first 15 minutes. And after making that choice that will influence the ending, though the ending either way with either choice is pretty much static. It doesn't change that much. Following that choice is the revelation of something horrific as a murder occurs to one of Max's good friends that leads to an investigation where she and her other friend Moses are pinned as suspects by a detective that seems somewhat ruthless and downright schizophrenic at times. And it's through this trauma that Max's powers are not only reignited but evolved, as she can no longer rewind time or stop time, but is able to shift between two timelines, appropriately named Dead and Living, in correlation to the one timeline where her friend has died and the other where her friend is still alive. Now, throughout the main hub, which is Caldeon University, where she, ironically enough, is teaching photography, even though to a certain extent Max comes across as just an elder statesman and a student more than an actual teacher, she is able to utilize these portals to split between the two timelines, to traverse between the living and the dead worlds. And upon doing so, she has the ability to not only solve certain puzzles, but also peek into the worlds and the conversations and maybe even get some information, as the energies of the people that are in the opposite timeline can still be seen if the player touches a particular button that activates something of a sonar. And this does allow for certain instances throughout the story where you can manipulate the actions of certain characters throughout the timelines. Though it is rarely used, it is an interesting premise and a gameplay addition that, once again, would have been more beneficial if used more often. In a lot of ways, that's where the lack of choice comes in to this game, where certain aspects and choices don't feel as significant as they could have if Max didn't have this power or it was limited in some way or form. For example, one of the earlier instances of Max potentially upsetting one of her NPC colleagues is an instance where Gwen, a transgender woman, is alerted that Max has been unintentionally eavesdropping on her phone conversations. Now, you do have a choice to avoid this problem, but if you, like myself, go straight into it and try to be upfront with Gwen about why you were eavesdropping on her conversation, she becomes angry with Max, and it leads to a situation in a later chapter where Max has the opportunity to read one of Sophie's manuscripts that Gwen is in possession of. If you are in Gwen's good graces by not being pegged as an eavesdropper, she will hand you the manuscript. And if you were eavesdropping and Gwen does get alerted about it, she will hide the manuscript in her locked desk. Now, this would seem like a roadblock that would potentially make you have to figure out another path or a route that may cut you out of a piece of gameplay. But instead, Max can just switch between the timelines and go into the desk and remove the manuscript and take it for herself, which is a testament to the amount of choices where a majority of the options feel benign. The decisions that the player has to make doesn't necessarily influence a majority of how the story itself interacts or plays out. As you further progress through the chapters, there is no looming feeling that if you make the wrong choice, that it will potentially ruin the major relationships to Max, and in turn result in a terrible ending, where Max has no ability to rewind time or try to make right what she's done wrong. And that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to the story, because a majority of it, beyond the choices, beyond some of the decisions that the developers and the writers made, is the fact that it feels like you're just experiencing a novel that is being presented to you in just visual form. While this was fine years ago, especially with the foundation that was set with the original Life is Strange, there's been so much progress in the way games have been presented from a narrative perspective, especially when it comes to making choices that should greatly influence how the gamer reacts and plays and enjoys the story, and in turn, how it influences the overall narrative, and most importantly, the conclusion. Double exposure doesn't have that, and that is easily the biggest drawback about the story, beyond some rather big plot holes and this somewhat failed attempt at trying to recreate the insanity that was the final chapter of the first Life is Strange.
Safi. Everything is about Safi nowadays. This isn't about Safi, Max. This is about you and me.
Right.
Come on. Illicit day drinking with your coworkers is sexy. Be sexy, Max.
Far be it from me to pass up an opportunity to accrue more sexy points.
Now, on the opposite end of the tell and don't show problem is the show but don't experience situation with Max and her other power. In the second chapter, we are really revealed to understand that Max has a complementary power to her time jumping power, in that she can manipulate certain objects and phase them through the different timelines. Unfortunately, that only happens via cutscenes. We cannot physically do that in the game, which could have been a great gameplay implementation to really add to some of the puzzles or even some solutions to certain problems and scenarios. In the same way, the environment are the few hubs that we get to explore throughout this area in Vermont. The game feels a lot more claustrophobic, which made more sense in Life is Strange 1, the original game, because of the campus setting, but we still got to explore the town and see beyond what was the most strenuous and, to a certain extent, heartbreaking areas of Arcadia Bay. And the same thing happened in True Colors with Haven Springs, where we were able to see more of just the central hubs, the main areas for the main characters. In the case of Max in Life is Strange and Alex Chen in Life is Strange True Colors, and that definitely can't be understated when it comes to the state-hopping adventure that was Life is Strange 2 for brothers Sean and Daniel. And when it comes to the overall conclusion of the game, minor spoilers because of the post-credit scene. There is this revelation that Life is Strange is moving to a certain extent beyond the simple murder mystery, teen drama, rom-com with some supernatural elements, and in turn is trying to become its own version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with one character trying to gather a bunch of people after she discovers that, yes, there are more people with powers out there like herself to potentially help the world. Even though when she gives her speech about doing so, her journey to find these people, to find these powered individuals, she came across as a supervillain more than an actual would-be hero. From a technical aspect, the game looks and sounds mostly great, though there were some issues beyond Chapter 2 that became more prevalent, including graphical issues like certain items getting stuck in mid-air after a
Sounds
cutscene
like
concludes.
bummer.
And even some characters during particular instances sounding like they recorded inside of a tunnel instead of an actual recording studio. And those moments were mostly associated with more spoiler-heavy dialogue sequences.
She knows you're still here for her, too.
Overall, Double Exposure is really a mixed bag. It's a game, and most importantly, a narrative that has so much potential when it first starts, and essentially those first 3 chapters realize that in a lot of ways, even if the gameplay is somewhat unfulfilled. But then by chapter 4, and definitely in chapter 5, it goes off the rails narratively and leaves you wanting so much more. Couple that with the fact that there is a $10 to $20 add-on for DLC and extra costumes that doesn't do much to add to the overall aesthetic or the enjoyment of the game, with this cat DLC that essentially turns into a long-running side quest throughout several chapters for a couple of trophies. It doesn't have any influence or makes the game better or worse with it or without it. This may go down as one of the most middle-of-the-road Life is Strange experiences thus far, and doesn't feel like a hearkening back to the days of Arcadia Bay, or even has the emotional weight of True Colors. And even if you're a big fan of the franchise and have been looking forward to the return of Max Caulfield as the central protagonist to the franchise, it's hard to give this a full recommendation. If you enjoyed the first game or even the subsequent sequels, it's worth playing, but at a sale price, at least half a price of what you originally are being asked for. And the DLC at this point is not even necessary, unless you're a trophy hunter. Even though the franchise doesn't feel like it's going in a good direction with this game, maybe they can turn it around with the next Life is Strange. Similar to how Max can convince anyone to tell her the truth by sticking a bottle cap in their favorite candy.
Bougie.
Deliver this to Safi.
Hey, Safi. Want a piece of candy? There's a few left.
Oh, twist my arm. Shit. It's a conspiracy. Come on, Max. Surely you, of all people, would let a girl have her secrets.
Ugh, fine. But this is your only get out of jail free card, and I'm taking the cat back for next time.